With a spanking breeze and a moderate sea, the man who hooks a bluefish earns his dinner.
Many men spend practically their entire lives as fish cleaners.
Down in a reef, we found lots of angry-looking moray eels.
We hoisted aboard an Ionic capital, which has been buried in the seabed since before Christ was born.
She fingers marble carving, almost as perfect as it came from the Greek sculptor's chisel, over 2,000 years ago.
A floating mat of vegetation advances out over the water surface in a small lake, in a cool, humid climate.
As the mat advances farther, and the lake ages, scarcely decomposed organic matter accumulates in the lake basin. Until after some thousands of years, the lake will be converted to forest.
Coast, cut by the sea into cliffs, bays, and stacks.
Boulder of basalt protecting the portion of beach underneath it.
Weathered sandstone cliffs showing irregular honeycombing and weathering along plains of stratification.
In mountainous country, fractured bedrock often forms the surface of the ground. Soil and subsoil are missing.
But this evening the wind carried the sparks onto the tent and burned it.
She tries to knife a grouper, which is bristling its dorsal spines in wariness.
He tickles the belly of a pakeway, the Mediterranean rockfish.
The channel leading out of this pond seems to go upward over a saddle. In fact, the stream draining the pond flows away below the surface, undermining the soil over it, which has collapsed to form a small valley.
60 square feet of undersea jewelry, the ceiling of a grotto of semi-precious red coral. The growths resembling caterpillars are the same red coral, covered with lithe coral-building animals.
The migration of the flounder's eyes is a strange phenomenon of fish life.
By what strange quirk of nature, the left eyes of species inhabiting cold water usually migrate to the right side of their head, while the right eyes of most species inhabiting warm water journey over to the left. Having the two middle tail features, immensely lengthened and very narrowly webbed, but terminated by a spoon-shaped enlargement, as in the mote moths and some of the hummingbirds.
They belong to that division of the family termed kingunters, living chiefly on insects and small land mollusks, which they dart down upon and pick up from the ground, just as a kingfisher picks a fish out of the water.
They are confined to a very limited area, comprising the Moluccas, New Guinea, and northern Australia.
About 10 species of these birds are now known, all much resembling each other, but yet sufficiently distinguishable in every locality.
The Amboinese species is one of the largest and handsomest. It is full 17 inches long, to the tips of the tail feathers. The bill is coral red, the undersurface pure white, the back and wings deep purple, while the shoulders, head and nape, and some spots on the upper part of the back and wings, are pure azure blue. For northerners, breakup is the first sign of spring.
We consider lakes first, then rivers.
Freeze up on a river in late fall. The first ice takes the form of thin ice pans, rounded by repeated collisions.
The same river after spring breakup.
Thick ice floes float down the river. Some were deposited on shore when the river level was high, owing to a temporary ice jam downstream.
Unlike a lake, whose freeze-up date is determined by local temperatures, the freeze-up date of a stretch of river depends on the history of the water, on where it has come from, and how long it has taken to come. If necessary, it can be simple.
The simplest way of taking photomicrographs is to mount a camera with its lens set at infinity, as closely above the microscope eyepiece as possibly, and to open the camera stop fully.
If the microscope was first focused with relaxed accommodation, then the photomicrograph will be sharp, but usually vignette.
This is due to the fact that, in combination with a camera lens of normal focal length, only wide-angle microscope eyepieces cover the entire field of view. Any doubts regarding critical focus can be eliminated if a single lens reflex camera is employed.
Microprojection is a valuable technique if several people want to observe a microscopic image simultaneously.
For smaller groups, a viewing screen is employed, which is simply exchanged for the observation tube, and which offers an image scale of 10 times the objective magnification.
A less expensive solution is to project the microscopic image onto a white surface with the aid of a deviating prism attached to the eyepiece.
Emerald Lake lies beyond.
The stems of water shield spiral to the surface, anchoring their floating leaves 10 feet above the bottom. As the water shield grows in such beds, the floating leaves provide necessary shade from the sun, which shines deep into the clear northern waters.
For the many small fishes inhabit the beds, the stems serve as defensive barriers against predators. A thin layer of protective film grows around the water shield, and supports algae and aquatic insects.
These in turn provide food for the fishes that live there. Lakes that have large beds of water shield around their perimeters and shoals are apt to contain large populations of panfishes.
She swims down toward the shark and pilot fish. She gets behind the shark and touches the caudal fin.
The beast turns, but not toward her. He comes at me.
A blind deep-sea fish, whose chief contact with life is by means of the long tentacles-like rays of the pectoral fins.
A common deep-sea fish with part of the inner fin skeleton visible outside of the body.
Various color phases of the same individual. The blue phase is the normal surface color. The white is assumed just before death.
A terminal phase male of the bluegill is courting a female. The two are about to mate.
Wearing the mid-season dress of foam rubber, she flies along the reef with red gorgonians she picked in the twilight zone.
The first time we ever saw this subtle species of coral was on an underwater ramble during the war.
At 132 feet, the coral looked dark blue.
Here with color-corrected flash photo technique, we show the true colors of the blue zone for the first time.
A colorful 5-inch green sunfish peers from within a protective crevice among near-shore boulders, revealing the characteristic large mouth and emerald spots on the face.
Rarely venturing far from such a habitat, sunfish are quick to dart into holes and spaces around boulders, sunken trees, and vegetation. They cautiously leave their cover in small groups in search of minnows and surface and aquatic insects, and when frightened often remain in groups, huddling tightly in the small cracks and spaces of their cover.
Secure in their man-made shelter, or crib, a large number of rock bars and young walleye congregate for the artificial but effective cover it provides in open water. In the winter, these cribs are built on the ice at specific locations about a lake. And with the melting of the ice in spring, they sink and settle to the bottom.
In lakes with little natural cover, construction of cribs has greatly increased populations of game fishes.
We enter the sea, holding our breaths on goggle dives in 1936.
My closest companion plunges into the Mediterranean, on a bet that she could spear 220 pounds of fish in a morning.
She breaks a spear on a 50-pound grouper.
She goes up for another spear, submerges again, gets her fish, and here ascends with the broke and harpoon hanging from the grouper.
The treasures of the sea are many, but none is more certain to yield delight to the true sportsman than the game fishes that disport in its waters.
The commercial fisherman, with his seines and hand lines, is perennially harvesting boatloads of sea fish for a large consuming public. But the real joy of the ocean is reserved for those with rods and lines, properly designed to put the fisherman and his prize on even terms, where human skill and piscatorial generalship can each have its innings, and the issue remains in doubt to the climax.
Once a successful strike has been made, the game is to bring the quarry to the boat side with rod and reel.
A little too rigid holding of the rod, a momentary failure to keep the line taut, a little lapse of skill in the manipulation of the reel. In short, any one of a dozen kinds of mishaps, and the battle is lost or begun again. Leaping into the air, running hither and yon, diving, darting, and fighting every inch of the way, the great fish gives battle.
Note that the lever arms must be extremely short, because of confinement within a tubular exoskeleton. That the extensor muscle above is, as expected from the demands of jumping, larger than the flexor below, and that the muscle fibers are short and oblique in this pinnate arrangement. The staff artist is painting a living fish.
She is coloring a plaster model from a living fish.
A squirrel fish keeps an intent eye on her.
A portion of the huge fish was sent to King George for his Christmas dinner.
The sexes of fishes are not as readily distinguishable as in the case of birds. Males and females are usually so much alike that only the expert recognizes the differences, and in many species, the dissecting knife must be deployed to determine the sex.
Though fish are not commonly regarded as meat, there is no characteristic difference between fish flesh and that of animals. Protein and water form the bulk of fish flesh, and pound for pound, there is almost as much protein in fish meat as in beefsteak. Oily fish, such as shad, herring, and eel, are especially nutritious. Fish roe usually contains more protein than beef, and some fat in addition.
In the making of caviar, the eggs are removed from the fish and gently rubbed over a fine screen, by which they are separated from their enveloping membrane. Under the screen, the released eggs fall into a trough, through which they pass into tubs. In these tubs, salt is carefully stirred with the eggs, and it draws their watery constituents from them, and forms a copious brine. Later, the eggs are poured into fine meshed sieves, where they are allowed to drain until dry. They are then put into casks or cans and are ready to go on to commerce.
She swims through a coral garden under the Red Sea. The antler-like yellow growth is fire coral, which stings worse than poison ivy. The powerful flash we used lights up a 6-foot radius. In the background, where the light does not reach, is the normal monochromatic blue of the twilight world.
To the undersea explorer, the canyons are out of scale and unbelievable. To rise along the wall is an impossible dream. He accustoms his eyes to the darkness before entering a cave 100 feet down.
To frighten its enemies, this fish is permitted by a considerate nature to fill itself with air when approached. Sometimes it puffs too much and bursts.
Blake is sailing up the Atlantic Ocean coast
From where?
from Key West to Cape Cod.
Oh, fun.
They set sail on Saturday around 10 p.m. Such a disorganized group. They're supposed to set sail on May 25th.
And are they going just straight up the coast, or are they coming in?
Well, they'll come in to fill up their diesel engines when they need to, but otherwise they're provisioned. They're trying to get to Cape Cod to start the summer tourist trade. They do